Hey everyone, welcome back to Therapist Uncensored. I'm Kelley, and I am here with my guest today, Judith Matz. So, Judith is a therapist, author, and speaker with an expertise in helping people heal their relationship with food and feeling more at home in their body. So, her expertise and our focus today is going to cover everything from chronic dieting, binge and emotional eating, body image, and weight stigma. So I'm super excited, Judith. Welcome to the show.
Oh, and thank you so much for having me here today. It's a pleasure.
So,
So,
what I was going to mention, you have written two books, one for professionals, right? You wrote, co-authored a book, Beyond a Shadow of a Diet, which is now in its third edition, which is exciting, with Ellen Frankel. And that's focusing on helping professionals with clients who struggle with the issues that we're mentioning of binge and emotional eating and body image. And so I definitely want to talk straight to the professionals. But first, you just recently came out with a workbook entitled Emotional Eating, Chronic Dieting, Binge Eating, and Body Image Workbook, which you also co authored. And this is a fantastic resource for helping us all just make peace with food, right? And reduce body shame.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, what I think about is that it's January, and this is the time of year where we have so many people making resolutions to lose weight, and seeing that as good self-care. And so what I hope to talk about today is why, as much as people want to do something to be healthier, to feel that they look better, whatever their motivation is, to
Hmm.
also understand why, unfortunately, most diets fail. So, if you think about it, nobody ever wakes up in the morning and says, gosh, I look fantastic today. I feel so good. I'm so healthy. I think I'll go on a diet, right? No,
Well, yeah, some people wake up and say that, but they're not ending it with, I think I'll go on a diet. Yeah, I really.
right. So what happens is that people can choose from hundreds, maybe thousands of programs and plans out there. So there's low cal, low fat, low carb, and these days things that are popular are like intermittent fasting or Whole30 or whatever it might be.
Mhm.
And the trickiest thing about this is that every diet works in the short run, right? So somebody
Right.
starts a diet and they eventually start to lose some weight. And there's a sense of, I'm in control. I've got it this time. It's almost like a high or a really virtuous feeling. And as they continue and lose some weight, people come up to them and say, gosh, you look terrific. I'm so proud of you. You're taking such good care of yourself. So you have to wonder, why is it that like research shows, upwards of 95 to 98% of people who go on a diet will regain the weight, and one third to two-thirds will end up higher than their pre-diet weight.
Really? So let's just slow down and take that in. So you're saying that individuals, like, you make that progress, and I can totally relate to that. You feel like really empowered and people are noticing, but 95% will regain the weight.
Right.
Wow. And then how much will rebound above the weight?
One third to two-thirds end up
Wow.
higher than their pre-diet weight.
Why
So
is that?
okay, so we're going to talk about, I can talk about like both the psychological and the physiological reasons.
Okay.
So psychologically, that's in some ways the easier way. Like, let's say I tell you starting tomorrow, Anne, you can never have ice cream again. What are you going to do tonight?
I'm gonna eat ice cream because I love chocolate, deep dark chocolate with a little caramel.
Yeah, sounds delicious. But but most people will answer that. I'm going to eat ice cream tonight, whether I'm hungry for it or not, and they're going
So
to eat
true.
more than they need, right? So
Hmm.
deprivation, psychological deprivation. So people go along and they restrict something, and the
Hmm.
day comes, whether it's a day, a week, a month, 6 months, the day comes when that psychological deprivation comes in, and they find themselves
Hmm.
eating the very food they've forbidden. I always like to say the foods start to glitter. Like if you say you can't have ice cream or chocolate, you just notice it all the time. You think of it, it creates a preoccupation.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So we've got that going on. But
Because
now,
you're thinking of how much you would want it. You're feeling proud that you're restricting it, but you're saying that now my mind is storing that as a deprivation or something that I'm missing out on.
and here's even before we talk about the physiological, then here's something that gets really difficult. So you tell yourself, ice cream is bad or chocolate's bad. You can't be trusted with it. So you have to keep it out of the house, right? But it's
Hmm.
increasing in value. Like we want what we can't have. That's a natural reaction. So when all of a sudden you do bring it into the house, maybe for your kids or something, and you find that you then can't stop eating it. You say, see, this is proof. This is proof, right? That I can't be trusted. And so you're artificially creating this intensity around these very foods you're forbidding. You're creating scarcity, which creates a greater desire. So that's what happens psychologically. And you don't even have to go on a diet for that to happen, just the thought of it. So before the holidays, a lot of people think starting January 1st, can't have whatever foods. They're already at risk of eating those very foods before they're taken away.
Which is creating all sorts of things psychologically and physically, I imagine. How I can relate to that, honestly, the ice cream wouldn't be the one that would hit me. It would be potato chips for me. I'm a salty.
Yeah.
But that I do that exact same thing. Like I don't usually have it in the house, but if I bring it in the house for somebody, I dive in. It's like this hidden pleasure that I can just like, oh, and if it's for the moment, then I can overdo it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the antidote to that is what we call habituation, like exposing yourself to chips so they're always around. We can talk a little bit more then about how you attune to your body, how you start to think about that. But let me go back to the deprivation. I talked about psychological deprivation, but there's also a physiological deprivation. So if you think about our ancestors way back, they lived in times of feast and famine. And in times of feast, it's safe for the metabolism to rev up and use up energy because there's always more food. But it's the opposite during times of famine. The body's job is to keep us alive. And it doesn't know the difference between a diet and a famine. And it thinks that the person is in trouble. And so it gets really good at slowing down metabolism. And you'll hear people say, I'm barely eating anything, but I've hit a plateau. I'm not losing weight. That's because your body is desperately trying to keep you alive. And so when people go on a diet, they hope to lose fat, they lose water, and they lose muscle. But muscle's the part of our body that's metabolically active. So the person has all these things working against them. Their body has the psychological deprivation, the physiological deprivation. And eventually, unless they develop an eating disorder like anorexia, they break through the restraints. And all that, I mean, for some people, it's what we call rebound eating, like kind of you're making up for, you're eating the very foods you've forbidden, or you're under eating in the day, so you make up for it at night. But it also can precipitate binge eating. Binge can be more emotionally based, but often for people, there's that component of the restriction. And, so you're controlling, and then you start and you're out of control, right? People feel out of control. And that's what I think is the most insidious part of the whole cycle is the shame people feel. Because first, they have the message that they don't have the right shape or size of a body. And so they do what diet culture tells them, which is to go on a diet. And eventually, when they break out of those restraints, the shame and blame is at their doorstep instead of the product, which is the diet that is a setup for failure. And like I said earlier, but part of why it's so tricky is it works in the short run. So like similar to if I said, hold your breath in, like you can do it.
Right.
You can only do it so long. And then your body's going to take over, right? And you're going to breathe. Our weight regulation system is beyond our conscious control. So we can manage it for a while, but eventually it's going to keep us alive. And then what happens when the person gains back the weight is that they've lost fat and muscle, but they're gaining back more fat, and the body gets better at storing fat for the next famine. So what we see is the more people diet, the higher their weight goes over time. We all have a set point, which is where our body naturally falls when we're eating when we're hungry most of the time, stopping when we're full most of the time, active in a way that suits our lifestyle. And it seems to be about a 10 to 20 pound range. But it's kind of like a thermostat, like you set it at 72, it clicks off. And then when it gets colder, the heat clicks back on. That's how our weight regulation system works. It keeps us in that same set point unless we're doing something to like jiggle it and mess it up.
That makes a lot of sense. And so one of the reasons you're saying besides the psychological deprivation, which I love the distinction between the two, because we talk a lot about just the idea of what happens when we think we have scarcity. We have scarcity of attention. We have scarcity of love. We become preoccupied with it. And you're saying this exact same thing with food.
Yeah.
But you're also saying the physical aspect of the preoccupation is that the body is going to, I think what you're saying is the body's going to use when you're in famine is going to use muscle more likely than fat because the fat is in reserve. It's holding the fat in reserve because the body thinks that it's in deprivation mode.
Well, it's slightly different. And since I'm
Okay.
a physiologist, I don't want to get it wrong. But what I come to understand is that the metabolism slows down,
I see.
right? So,
Mm-hmm.
if we have a higher metabolism, we're using up energy more quickly. And people are changing their physiology,
I see what you're
literally
saying.
changing
Yeah.
their physiology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This is not an easy cycle to be part of because you're ending it with once we start to gain weight back and we get in this cycle of shame and feeling like a failure, that's also inducing the self protective kind of strategies of when you feel down and you feel like a failure that you might then
Turn to food.
turn to food. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the biggest, one of the reasons I love this work and one of the messages I really want to come through is to have compassion for yourself, because
Mm-hmm.
people feel like there's something wrong with them. I don't have willpower. I'm self-destructive. No, it's never about that. Um, what for people, particularly people who are at higher weights in this culture, you're marginalized. Weight stigma is everywhere. And so it's
Right.
understandable that that's protective to try to get out of a marginalized group identity. Like you're saying, in times of emotional distress, we need some ways to regulate. And
Mm-hmm.
food is the earliest way we're soothed.
Mm-hmm.
And so if people can understand when you reach for food to get through a tough time, you're trying to help yourself. And that's a good thing,
Right. It's like
right?
reaching for your caregiver or your mom for some kind of soothing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Protective. And so, ultimately, as therapists, we work with people to understand how to regulate in different ways, understand what those
Mm-hmm.
really injuries or the trauma is. But food is a really understandable thing that people reach for, particularly people with trauma histories. Like if you think about children or adolescents, they don't have a lot of resources available, and food might be one of the few things they have access to get.
Feels maybe safest, right? Especially if you have trauma around that your caregivers or someone that you thought you could trust and you couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So developing that, we always talk about compassion and curiosity, right?
Right.
Compassion for the part that needs to go to the food and then getting curious. And, for people with binge eating disorder who are, having those out of control experiences with food, just beyond, what we might call emotional eating. Again, if you're familiar with internal family systems, that's a firefighter, right? Like in a time of distress when you have no other options, it's a manager trying to get you through something really
Mm.
difficult. And so starting with that compassion is a great place to start. And there's ways to work yourself out of it. And I'm happy to, talk about that.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Dive in. Yeah.
So, as therapists, of course, we explore underlying emotional reasons. And I was trained, I went to grad school in like 1980. So I was trained as a psychodynamic therapist. There weren't a whole lot of other kinds of therapy at that
Right.
time, CBT or, psychodynamic. And my understanding when I had my first client, who was in the 1980s, what we called a compulsive eater was the term that we used then, was that if we could just understand why she turned to food, eating was the symptom, and if we could understand why, that would go away. And so we understood a lot about why she went to food, but it didn't. A lot of things got better in her life, but not that.
Well, and it's so funny you say that was in the 1980s. I bet you therapists out there and actually the non-therapists alike probably have been given a lot of that belief right now. If you could just understand why you're overeating,
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
going to make it up. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're going to step away from that emotional exploration for a moment and talk about actually the other part of the work I do that is so essential, which is to help people end the diet mindset.
Okay.
Because when you have someone, so you mentioned potato chips. Let's say you find yourself eating a bag of potato chips. How do you know if it's because of it's deprivation driven, like you've been telling yourself that you're not supposed to have them and now all of a sudden they're there and you want them? Or whether it's emotional, that something happened that earlier in the day you're aware of, or maybe not aware of, that was a disappointment or a hurt, and you're trying to numb yourself, distract yourself, soothe yourself, whatever it may be. So
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to end the deprivation-driven dieting, or deprivation-driven eating is what I mean. So I do a lot of work with people to, first of all, reconnect with their bodies. When you're in diet mindset, the whole point of the diet industry is to tell you you can't trust yourself. You are not
Ah,
trustworthy. We're going to tell you how to eat. And it disconnects people from their natural hunger, and from figuring out what truly satisfies them, right?
right.
So one of the things I start with is asking people to recognize signals of physical hunger. And this we think about interoceptive awareness, being able to read those internal body cues, which many people have access to, but there may be people who don't. So I'm going to just for now talk about people who can do that. So if you ask people, how do you know when you're hungry? I'll get a whole range of responses, but I will get things like I get a headache, I get shaky, I can't concentrate, I'm hangry. Those are all signs that somebody is too hungry.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And when you get too hungry, like think about what happens. It's desperate. Everything
Mm-hmm.
sounds good, and people
Yeah.
will eat more than they need. So helping people reconnect with the signal for hunger, like feeling a gnawing or an empty feeling, and
Mm-hmm.
responding to it before they're ravenous or very hungry is key. And then the next question is,
Is that just to kind of take it just a little bit slower? So is that hard to do for people generally? Like, do you find that an easy step to be able to recognize that? Because I could see in a way sometimes that's not as
is,
easy. Because
is it okay for me to ask you? Can you?
yeah, yeah,
How,
I'm totally game. I'm all in.
how do you know when you're physically hungry?
Well, it's a great question because when I was writing the book, I think I thought I was hungry, and I would get up when actually I'm fairly confident I was anxious and
Hmm.
stirred up.
Hmm.
So if I stop to think about it, is I feel kind of a sense of ravenous in my stomach. I can kind of feel a stirring.
Hmm. When
But
you're
I bet I don't actually wait for that as often as I probably could. I like, okay, I'm hungry because it's noon and I have a client at 12:30 and I need to eat is probably more what comes to my body.
And sometimes we need to do that. Like,
Right.
I don't think I'll be hungry for another hour, but if I wait an hour, I have back to back clients, I can't eat and I'll be ravenous and I won't be able to concentrate. So it makes sense to feed myself a little earlier. But that still involves knowing that, still involves checking in and saying, I'm not quite there, versus automatically, I just eat at this time every day. Like,
That's
I,
true. Yeah.
you know, I, I do this work, of course, with clients all the time, but when I've had friends here and there when I explain to them what I do, tell me that their relationship with food just feels better. Not because they were struggling, but it's sort of what you're saying. Like, I just never thought to slow down and ask, or I don't really give it as much thought as I might.
Yeah,
And
giving it the thought, am I hungry? Right? Like that's not necessarily something that comes. We're just so on a schedule. We wake up, it's time to eat. It's like there's so much about time orientation than it is about, I think that's what I hear you saying, and rather than about attuning to your own body.
think about it, babies know when they're hungry. Like, we are born
That's that's true.
knowing. And here's why it's so important. When you're hungry, that's when you can access what would actually satisfy me right now. Because eating should be a source of both nourishment and pleasure. And the way diet culture works, we've just put so much anxiety and angst into eating. It's not fun for people, but
It's true.
it should be pleasurable and it should satisfy us. So, like think of, I'm going to ask you, but I hope the audience will try this too. Like think of a time that you were hungry and you got exactly what you were hungry for.
Hmm.
How did that feel?
Well, that's kind of funny. There's two different things that immediately come to my mind. The time when but honestly, it's so funny you should say that. I'm probably not hungry. It's that I'm having a fantasy. My favorite food's fried chicken. And I bet I'm desiring the experience of fried chicken more than actually feeling hunger and thinking that's going to satisfy me. So if I stop to think about when I really do tune in my regular day and I'm hungry and I end up doing what I mostly do, a couple of eggs and some beans and some spinach, it feels really satisfying. Like I've waited until I'm hungry and I've eaten that. I really actually am a lot more satisfied than when I indulge in the fried chicken.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's, that idea of satisfaction. That's often what comes up for people. I feel satisfied,
Yeah.
happy, I feel content. My guess is there are times though where the fried chicken could be what I call a good match. Like if you trust, when your body wants something with a little bit more fat and the protein,
Yeah.
that might be a perfect match. But and now do the opposite. Think of a time when you've been hungry. So when you've actually been hungry, but for whatever reason you did not get what you were hungry for. Wasn't
Mm.
available or whatever reason. And how did that feel?
It makes me more preoccupied, more satisfied.
Right. So
Yeah.
dissatisfied, people say disappointed, deprived.
Yeah, like a little deprived.
Okay, so that's the thing. People who are what I call attuned eaters, or more commonly, it's called intuitive eaters. I like
Mhm.
attuned because better than intuitive because I don't think it's intuitive necessarily. I think we have to slow down and really tune into our bodies.
Mhm.
But people who are attuned eaters, most of the time, are hungry. They get something that satisfies them, and they feel they're physically and emotionally good, and they move on with their day. End of story till the next time they're hungry.
What about though, Judith, if I guess what's coming to my mind, and I bet it's from the diet culture, is that it's very easy to have a desire for comfort foods if I'm in a pattern. Like when I'm in a pattern of healthy eating, then I crave the healthy food. But when I've let myself go much more into my comfort foods, and I think of comfort food as, heavier potatoes, things like that.
So
How do you distinguish between sort of satisfaction, like going for something that your body's really asking for, and going for something that's going to bring it comfort?
see, I'm not sure that that's a distinction that you want to make. So I don't know anything about your history with food
Hmm.
and all of that. And you can share as much or little as you choose. But if you think about it, like bodies like a lot of variety. And
Yes.
so what happens partly in diet culture, and in diet culture can overlap with wellness culture, is we get into what's good, what's bad, what's healthy, what's unhealthy. And so people then start to say, well, I shouldn't eat those foods, they're unhealthy. But potatoes are really satisfying and our
Hmm.
bodies need carbs. And so from my perspective, as I work with clients, it's permission to eat all types of foods. And then we find we like variety. So a dinner might be salmon, which is quote healthy in our culture, and vegetables, which are quote healthy, and potatoes, which are actually also healthy.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with potatoes. They're really satisfying. And so when you get somebody who can afford the salmon and vegetables and doesn't, and you even use that language, and I let myself. It's like we don't ever say I let myself eat an apple,
That's true.
right?
Yeah.
But it's the foods that we at some level, consciously or unconsciously, are deeming as not what I'm supposed to eat. That's what we let ourselves have. You can hear that difference. And
Hmm.
so, um, as people truly give themselves permission to eat all types of foods, we like a lot of variety. And I've never met anybody when they really listen to and trust their body who only wants, the chips and the sweets and the pizza any more than I've met anybody who only wants veggies and salads and fruits.
That's a really, really good point. I'm just letting myself sit with that when I'm listening to myself. Very rarely. I don't even like, yeah, like I'm not craving chips most of the time and I'm not craving fried chicken. But you're right. Like if I start to think of the deprivation, I get more preoccupied with it.
And,
But really, when I'm listening to my body,
and
I'm very happy eating spinach and eggs
yeah,
and beans and watermelon. That makes me the most satisfied.
but could you be peaceful eating fried chicken one day if that's what you were truly craving, or eating
Yes.
like you're having a sandwich and you have some chips with it? Like,
Well, the thing is, I can and I have been, but I haven't often struggled with that. But I know as a therapist working with clients who really have had that kind of a struggle. Like so for me, I'm like I've always had in my mind I don't let myself actually deprive because I kind of naturally do that. But there's some people who really self-describe as having, like little desire, like a lot of preoccupation for what they consider unhealthy food. And so I think what I hear you saying is if as you teach in your work about intuitive eating, you're helping people get away from the restriction
Mhm.
and the limits and that you can't have, and this is healthy and this is unhealthy, to actually tuning into the body's desire.
Right. And then learning little by little that you can trust the body, that the body wants all different types of foods. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Do you find yourself with somebody who has had maybe a chronic history of binging? Is it generally teaching the intuitive eating come pretty naturally as you help them focus on it, or is it more of a struggle? And what makes what
Yes.
makes a struggle?
It depends on the client. And I'm not saying this is the whole story because there's the
Sure.
emotional trauma that can also be, but this is where I like to start is helping people create this internal structure. So what happens, just like we were talking about earlier, is that when somebody starts to make the match, which is what I
Mm-hmm.
call when somebody's hungry and eats the foods that their body likes, it feels so much better physically and
Mm-hmm.
emotionally. And that's the incentive to move in that direction. One of the things I find is like if I have somebody, and this is in my own story, I struggled with this for a period between high school and grad school into some internship. And then I had a situation where I just couldn't diet. And I realized that it was the deprivation that was triggering me. But I grew up in a family where we were fortunate that food was plentiful. There was no dieting in my home. And, my mom liked to bake, but we had just a lot of different kinds of food. So I was going back to something. And I find that when I work with clients who have some of that in their history, it's easier than like, I have one client where at the age of 4, she was told she was too fat and had been on
Mm.
a diet since 4. So she has nothing to go back to. She
I
has
see what you're saying. Going back to a time that you didn't center on deprivation, that you centered on more into, and you were more intuitive.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that makes the healing
Mm-hmm.
easier in a sense. But, the flip side of that is when I'm working with clients with a lot of trauma, the
Mm-hmm.
binge eating, like I said before, is protective. I remember one client where she would have moments of the attuned eating and loved it, but there was a lot of binging. And she worked in like research and she wanted to know like how many, like she wanted a timeline of how long this was all going to take. And it took some time for me to help her see that I didn't want her to stop binging. Like she needed the food to get through life at the moment. And until we had done some other work, she wasn't ready
Oh,
to let go of the
interesting.
binging. And, I remember the day she came and I tell this story. I do these trainings for Pessy and I always tell this story. The day she came in and said, Judith, I finally get it. When things are too chaotic, because she had a really chaotic life, I need the binges to numb out, like to stop all the thoughts. But
Mm-hmm.
when things are too quiet, I can't be that quiet in my mind. And I need the binges for stimulation. And so
Mm-hmm.
just having that understanding, that compassion allowed work
Yeah.
to continue. It was a really neat moment.
That is a really beautiful moment for both, right? To quiet the mind, but also the quiet mind eating a stimulation. Yeah, that's a insightful way to put it.
Yeah.
Hmm. So you mentioned trauma. What are some things that therapists, if you have some ears of therapists out there, what do you wish therapists understood more deeply around food and coping with trauma?
Well, great. Thank you for asking that. So, first of all, I want to say again that as people are now having more of the attuned experiences, they're in a stronger position to look at the emotional aspects of their eating. But when it comes to trauma, we know that there's a higher correlation with there's a high correlation with binge eating disorder. So if you're working with binge eating disorder, you work with trauma. But if you're working with trauma, you're going to have clients who have binge eating disorder, and they may not tell you about it. I don't know that
Mm-hmm.
routinely gets asked about. We ask about sexual abuse history and all of that, but asking people to describe their relationship with food, just an open question. How would you describe your relationship with food? Can give you a lot of helpful information. Some years ago, I was at the Psychotherapy Networker conference, and I ended up having a conversation with Gabor Mate about this because somebody had asked about obesity and trauma or something. And I just want to say, in general, I don't use the terms obesity and overweight, and I can explain why later if you.
Okay.
But he answered, and the way he answered, I don't remember exactly what he said, but I found my hand shooting up. And what I really want people in the trauma world to understand is that weight is a characteristic, not a behavior, right? So if you look at the adverse childhood experiences and what happens as the result, of those kinds of trauma, we talk about things like drug use or early pregnancy, and they will say obesity, but it's not obesity, it's binge eating.
Mm.
And it's really important to make that distinction because there are people at higher weights who aren't trauma survivors, right?
Right.
And there's also I think a very firm belief in the trauma world that once you heal your trauma, you can lose the weight, that the weight is protective. And because that's how Felitti came across the ACE scores. He had a couple people who were in his medical weight loss program who had lost a lot of weight. I worked in one of those too, so I know how that works.
Mm-hmm.
And when they gained it back very quickly, he found out that they had survived some sexual abuse. And so he made a conclusion. But lots of women have survived childhood abuse. Like in the population, like 2/3 of people in the United States are either in the overweight or obese categories of they're in the, yeah. And so you can expect that, like you can say 2/3 of people who blink are overweight or obese. Because do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, completely. Yes. And so to have that associated in everyone's mind that this is really a sign of pathology or a sign of trauma, and once you deal with the trauma, that's going to go away, really sets that individual up to be in a cycle of defeat. Let's say you're doing great emotionally, you gain the weight back, and you think, oh, I must not.
And also, like, think about, what we've talked about earlier is that the more people diet, the higher their weight goes over time. So you
Right.
have somebody who has trauma, let's say they turn to food, they binge, and as a result, they gain weight. But what happens once they gain the weight? They do what the culture says. They start dieting, which guarantees that they're going to end up at a higher and higher weight.
Mm-hmm.
And not that there's anything wrong with being higher at a higher weight, but they are ending up at weights higher than their body was initially meant to be.
Right.
And then the belief is, but if you just understand emotionally, you'll lose the weight. But there's nothing to back that up.
Mm-hmm.
And so people end up under this cloud of stigma,
Right.
And there are people at higher weights who certainly can see their fat as protective, although it's also the case that people who are higher weight experience sexual abuse, get raped, and it doesn't necessarily protect somebody. And there are people at lower weights who have binge eating disorder. And, so you can't, it's those assumptions that I think are so harmful. And so it's just something I've been focusing on. That's part of what I'll be talking about at the Networker conference.
I'm so glad you're going to the Networker. By the way, let's just stop for a moment and unpack that. So, yes, Sue and I are going to be there at the Networker in Washington, D.C. So it'll be very fun to meet you there in person, and I'm going to attend your conference. And I just think there's so many great people. So for those of you out there interested in coming to Psychotherapy Networker, absolutely jump in and do that. And in fact, you can even get a discount. We'll mention that at the very end of the podcast, how to find that out. So, but I'll be happy to, I'm excited to meet you in person.
I'm glad that you'll be there. And I'm looking forward to meeting you as well. And that really then gets into like how we're trained as therapists. I mean, there's so much attention these days to, I'll call it cultural humility and understanding. And we learn about so many different marginalized groups. But when it comes to people who are fat and anti-fat bias, we don't do well with it. We don't really teach it. And so, understandably as therapists, we've all grown up in the same culture. Like we've all gotten these exact same messages about foods being good and bad and thinner being better and all of that. And so of course we bring that to the therapy,
right. We think of it as that we're helping our clients with self-care. They wanted to lose weight. If we support them and help them lose weight, and we focus on the health. Let's help you find the health of you, which of course in our mind is helping them lose weight. If we can help them deal with their trauma, if we can help them get more healthy, we feel successful. So we get kind of wrapped up in that cycle.
Right. And it comes from a place of good intentions, but we all know now intention doesn't equal impact. And
For
so
sure.
sadly, our clients are experiencing weight stigma in therapy. And again, I know that's not what trauma therapists ever intend, but it fuels the shame cycle. Like if you're encouraging me as your client to lose weight and then I regain it and I have to tell you that, like, how do I feel? And if you're telling me to lose weight when there is zero evidence of any program or plan meeting like the 5-year criteria of being able to sustain it, you're prescribing or you're trying to support me with something that there's no evidence for. There's a woman named Esther Rothblum, and she wrote an article for the APA, and I don't remember the exact title, but she's looking at that in the therapy field. Like, why is it that we continue to offer something when there is zero evidence for the success? And she actually compares it at the end to conversion therapy.
Really?
She talks about like it took how many years it took for the field to stop, and asks, when are we going to stop trying to change the bodies of people in a way that they're not meant to change? And so I understand, because like I said, back in the 1980s, I was working with the OptiFast program, which was a medically supervised weight loss program. I thought, gosh, if I could help 1 or 2 people lose the weight and keep it off, I was doing such a great service to people.
Right.
I didn't understand the consequences of weight cycling. We know that the more people weight cycle, actually it increases risk for cardiovascular disease.
Wow.
So when it comes to health, I think I'll just share a couple of research, just general ideas of research study. We look at, like one study looked at all-cause mortality. And so this is a helpful study. So they looked at men who were fit and in the normal weight, what's considered normal weight category. And they assigned them all-cause mortality, the number 1.
All-cause mortality?
All-cause mortality.
Anything that causes mortality. Number 1. Okay.
Men who were in the normal weight category but unfit, their risk was 2.2. It doubled. Okay. Mm-hmm. The men who were in the obese category but fit, their risk was 1.1, barely any different than the normal weight category.
Oh, interesting. In fact, it's lower than...
And lower than the men who were normal weight and fit. So we just...
Wait, no, better than the normal weight, but unfit. So if I'm heavy, but I'm fit, I'm going to be in much better shape than if I'm thin and unfit.
Exactly.
And you're saying that there's not much difference between heavy and fit and the normal range of the normal and fit. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Because in our culture, we assume that, somebody who is thinner must be healthier. That's not the case. If somebody is in the obese category and unfit, their risk is 3.1. So we're not saying weight makes no difference, but it turns out fitness mitigates the risk, and fitness is much more reliable than weight loss.
That makes a lot.
Losing weight without being fit doesn't help. More recently, a researcher named Glenn Gazer, who's in the fitness world, did a meta-analysis, and it was the same results, that somebody who becomes fit, their weight may go down, their weight may go up, or it may stay the same, but they get all the health benefits. Somebody who just loses weight, he calls it a futile cycle, kind of a smaller version of the cycle I talked about, and they don't get the benefits.
So if you just lose weight, but you don't get more fit, you don't get the health benefits.
Not in a lasting way.
Okay. Wow, that's powerful if you really stop, because there is a lot of messages we get. You mentioned 2/3 of Americans are overweight. That's a whole nother topic. And my guess is it's not them listening to intuitive eating, but...
well, let's slow that down, because when we say, and I'll tell you in a minute why I don't like those words. When we say overweight, over what weight? Like, who's deciding what the correct weight is? If you look at cultures, as they become wealthier, people can also get taller. Mm-hmm. And it actually turns out that, and this is research from, oh my gosh, I'm having a moment. But let me say the research first, and it will come to me where it's from.
Okay.
People in the overweight category actually live the longest.
That's so, I have read that
And
recently.
there's over 40 studies showing that. But what's in Atlanta? Oh, my, the CDC. That's research according to Catherine Flagel at the CDC, who's a very well-respected researcher. So when we say it's bad to be overweight, like that's not what the research shows.
Interesting.
So
It's bad to be unfit. That's the key of what
yeah,
the
and
message you're saying is, I mean, again, you probably want to take the word bad out,
thank you.
but
It's just
yes, yes, yes. Thank you. I'm learning. It is not as, it is less healthy physically to be unfit.
so fit, right? So it's not a moral issue. So we don't want to
Yes,
turn into that. But fitness, is a positive behavior for people no matter what your size. Like
exactly.
like
Yeah.
thinner people shouldn't get a pass on that if we're looking at that as a healthful behavior. Another research study that I think is really fascinating too. It looked at four behaviors. So 5 fruits and vegetables a day, fitness again, moderate alcohol use, and no drugs. And
Okay.
so take then the weight categories, which are, the normal, overweight, and obese, and a person practices none of those behaviors, you see a big difference between the normal category and the risk for somebody in a higher weight category.
Wait. You're going to have to slow that down for me. Let's try that again. So you're saying there's four categories
Four
for
behaviors.
behaviors.
Say you have people who don't do any of those things. They're not even
Okay, which is fitness, moderate drinking. What were the other two?
5 fruits and vegetables a day,
5 fruits and vegetables a day,
no drug use.
and no drug use. So if you were to be able to be fit, only have moderate alcohol use, no drug use, and 5 fruits and vegetables a day, then
Any risk between the two groups is gone.
really the weight is just, it's, I forget the statistical.
Doesn't matter what the baseline weight is.
That is so powerful. I hope our listeners just take that in because but that's not what we're taught when we go to the physician. That's not what we're taught. You've got to lose weight or you're going to have all of these other health problems. And they focus so much on weight when you go to see a physician.
And this is a problem because I work with so many clients who are higher weight. And what happens is they don't go to the doctor because they cancel
Issue.
their appointments. Because, right, they don't want to be fat shamed at the doctor. And I used to say they
Mm.
avoid, but I use different language now. They're protecting themselves,
Mm.
you know? And so
Mhm.
I do a lot of work with people to identify providers out there, even if they don't totally understand what it means to be weight inclusive. At least they will respect not focusing on weight. Because, what happens is somebody goes in and they have high cholesterol and they're told lose weight. What happens if a thinner person goes in with high cholesterol? Thinner people get high cholesterol.
Mhm. Mhm.
What are they told? They might be told to be more physically active. They might be told to to reduce saturated fat in their diet, and they might be given medication.
So what you're saying is that the physician's centering on that one element, or let's say us as a therapist really supporting their belief that their whole life is going to change if they lose weight, is really joining the problem.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it can sound harsh, but it's being complicit.
It's being complicit. That's not harsh. It's really, I mean, that's a very insightful thing as a therapist. We think we're joining our clients in this place of health when really we are joining some of the fat shaming. When did we become? What do you think about? And is it just in the Western culture about this idea that thin is better? I mean, of course, in the media, that's all we see is super thin and thin being more attractive than heavy. How did we get in such
Yeah.
a bias around that?
Yeah. There's a new book. Well, that's not so new anymore. I think it was in 2019. So this book came out called Fearing the Black Body, The Racial Origins of Fat Phobia by Sabrina Strings. And what she talks about how is during the time of, first of all, eugenics, so bodies are being ranked, like what's the ideal white man, basically. And at the same time, it was a time of enslavement. And so the rationalization was that black people were less than human.
Mm,
They were out of control with sex, out of control with food. And so the new vision for white women was to be very controlled, right?
wow.
And,
Uh-huh.
and to have, that thinner body. And so I actually have a couple quotes if I can share them
Oh,
with.
love it.
Um, she says, by the 20th century, slenderness was increasingly promoted in the popular media as the correct embodiment for white Anglo-Saxon Protestant women. Not until after associations were already in place did the medical establishment begin its concerted effort to combat excess fat tissue as a major public health initiative. In this way, the phobia about fatness and the preferences for thinness have not principally or historically been about health. Instead, they've been one way the body has been used to craft and legitimate race, sex, and class hierarchies. Pretty interesting, huh?
You said say that last part: race, sex,
And
and
class,
in class hierarchies.
right? Because if you think about it, like people who are
Yeah.
poor, we,
Mm.
yeah. I mean, who can attain that kind of quote perfect thin body? People spend a lot of money, right?
Oh my gosh, it's a whole industry.
The
It's a
whole,
whole industry or business to make us believe that we are less than
yeah,
in all sorts of areas unless we are able to accomplish some sense of perfection physically or financially. And there's such a circular market. And to think how much we are participating in that market with this belief that thinness is the health and
right,
the fat shaming that
right.
we do if the body doesn't look like a stick figure.
Right. So
Yeah.
kind of come back to this then, because when I work with clients, it is scary to let go of trying to diet for weight loss. And people
Mhm.
not only, there's so many messages in our culture when you lose weight, then you'll be happy and sexy and successful and attractive, but also healthy. And so people can feel like they're giving up. And that's why it's so important for them to get information. Like, you can even think of it as just being holistic. Like our health, physical, emotional, spiritual, is so much broader than a number on the scale.
So much so,
And
yeah.
so what I'm talking about, this weight inclusive approach, and for anybody out there who's heard of health at every size, that's an example of a weight inclusive approach. Um, it's actually really hopeful because to the extent our clients are invested in their health and well-being, we have all kinds of ways to support them in practicing behaviors, developing positive, sustainable behaviors to integrate into their lives.
So what would be the ones that if you have a client coming to you and they really have, I mean, one thing that's so hard is that our culture has sold this bill of goods. So young women who are in their 20s and 30s really do struggle believing that men aren't going to be attracted to them. They are more attracted to they're more attracted to what we've been taught to be attracted to, right? So a young woman coming in who struggled with their weight in their body saying, this is the thing that's keeping me from being able to find a boyfriend or be successful because people are so biased. What would you suggest?
It's a really interesting question, and I'm going to answer it in multiple ways.
Good, good.
First of all, sometimes people say that who actually are very average size versus somebody who is
So true.
very, at a much higher weight. I mean, the marginalization is different at different sizes. So it's not all equal, right?
Yeah, that's a
You
good point.
know, um, and what I know from my work over these decades is I have clients in very large bodies who are in wonderful relationships with men or women or whatever, and I have clients who are more meeting diet culture standards who've had a really hard time, finding relationships. So I think as therapists, we have to again look at our own attitudes. Like, do we buy into it? Because it
Yeah.
makes sense that many of us will. Like what I'm talking about today is really an unlearning process.
Hmm.
And so I think just going back to as therapists, like we have all learned this, and I think it's really important to have compassion for yourself. Like sometimes I've done a workshop where, a guy came to me later today and said, later that day, I'm so upset. I never realized I had these thoughts. And I said to him, but now,
Yeah.
you can't know what you don't know, but now that you do, have compassion for it and do the work. So it's an unlearning. So I think that's why so much like, with our book, Beyond the Shadow of a Diet, we do a lot of that for therapists, like the unlearning part. And even in the workbook, we always have clinicians corner to kind of help you look at your own viewpoints and start to do the unlearning. So you,
Because if you don't unlearn, then it's really, really insightful. It's just light bulbs going on. If you don't take the time to unlearn your own biases, how much you participate
right,
and yes, and capitulate to that
right,
It's really, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wish my, it sounds so self-serving. I wish my like full day training was mandatory because so therapists, we're actually, because of who we are, we get this stuff pretty easily. Like,
Mm-hmm.
at least intellectually, it makes sense.
Yeah.
A lot of people who attend my programs are doing like they're still caught in this. I mean, it's hard
Mm-hmm.
to unlearn decades of these patterns, you know? So, all right, so we have the client who is saying, I can't date until I lose weight. So I would start to work with them on the fact, I might say that to them, there are a lot of people out there who have bodies similar to you who are in perfectly good relationships. There's a lot of people thinner who aren't. Let's look at it concretely and let's dig deeper. And
Mm-hmm.
so I might help them figure out, well, let's say you were going to date at this size, like give it a try. How would you go about it? Would you have friends introduce you? Would you go on one of the dating apps? We might then think about which dating apps are kind of softer, kinder in terms of, what they are. But what would you wear if you were meeting someone for the first time? Do you even own something that you'd feel comfortable in? And I would work with them on knowing what stores have clothes in their size. It's these days it's a little better. You can order online, and I just because I hear from other clients, I know resources. So I would do some of the concrete work and see if that would help them. But the thing is that people in our culture, and particularly women, there's a way that we're taught to burden the body. Like if we're having trouble dating, it's because we don't look right. So put on better
Oh,
makeup,
yeah, yeah.
lose weight, and the body gets burdened. But if you're getting to know this client, you might realize that because of their history, they have attachment issues. Doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
what size their body is, they're going to have trouble dating. And so it gets reinforced. Yeah, just lose the weight, it'll be fine. It won't be. And in fact, if they lose weight and then try to date, it's going to be very upsetting because it's not going to really be better.
And they're going to feel disappointed and that, yeah,
But
nothing works. Nothing works. Even I lost the weight and thinking how long they stay preoccupied and blocked by that thought because losing the weight and keeping it off, like you said, is just about impossible. And so they see themselves in this helpless cycle. And what you're offering is let's get off of that cycle. Let's
they're,
think about the dating
they're, work,
as you are.
they're working on the wrong issue.
Yes.
The issue is attachment and how to heal some of the attachment so it feels safe enough to be in a
Mhm.
relationship, right?
Right.
So that's again why I use that term. The body gets burdened. And we
Mm-hmm.
can help our clients unhook their body from their core issues
Mm-hmm.
so that they can date at whatever size they're at.
Ah, that's really beautiful. That's really beautiful. So, one of the things, the take home, there's so many questions I think I have in my body. Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, what is your thought about Ozempic? It's,
Oh, goodness. Sure, happy to talk about it.
yeah.
So, chances are that some of the people listening today are on Ozempic, and absolutely everybody has the right to make their own decisions about their
Mhm.
body. So, what I talk about, I want to talk about respectfully. Um, and what I said earlier today, why people pursue weight loss is that if you're in a higher weight body and you're experiencing fat shaming and anti-fat bias, it makes sense that if you have a way out, you might feel compelled to take it.
Sure.
The other thing that people will talk about is food noise. And actually, I'll just say this for your listeners. I do a quarterly newsletter. You can go to my website that'll be in the notes if you want to sign up. It's free. It comes out every season. But I just wrote an article about what is food noise.
Well, tell us give us the cliff notes. What is food noise?
Food noise is what we talked about at the beginning of our conversation when you can't stop thinking about food, right? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
preoccupied and it's disturbing. It interferes. It gets in the way of enjoying relationships and hobbies and being focused at work. But the thing about food noise, it's just a new term that's been coined for what we've always talked about. What I've always said, my work is about helping people end the preoccupation with food. That's what it is. It's a preoccupation.
Uh-huh.
And based on what we've talked about today, you can hear how that deprivation of dieting leads to a preoccupation. I wish people who are going on Ozempic for that reason would at least have the chance to work with someone if they have that accessible or read about it and end the diet mindset.
Mm.
That's when the food noise stops.
Oh,
I'm working with a woman who, well, when I started working with her, she's 75. binging since she was in her 20s. She's not binging anymore. She has a great relationship with food noise. That food noise has stopped.
How did you help her? Give us the the you've talked about it all the way through. And so I love it. So let's integrate it. Where were the 3 or 4 primary things that you think had the largest impact on her?
Yeah. She was, I mean, for whatever reason, she was ready when she heard about this work, but exactly what we talked about. For her, the biggest thing was ending the vilifying of foods. All her quote bad foods, we worked on the permission to eat them. And then we worked on paying attention when she was hungry to what would satisfy her. And sometimes it was those foods. Often it was things she ate regularly anyway. And as that happened for her, the noise went down, or the preoccupation, and she actually could regain pleasure in food. I mean, for some reason for her, for all those years, it was fairly straightforward. There was an emotional component, but it just wasn't as much as the deprivation. And, you know, this is something I love in this work too, is people heal their binge eating. So sometimes like people get started and they have an experience where they're eating when they're hungry and they're stopping when they're full and it feels really good. And they turn that into the new diet. Like I can only eat when I'm hungry and I have to stop when I'm full. And for most people, it doesn't go that quickly because you're unlearning, right? You don't want it to be control, right?
You need to give yourself the chance for your whole mind and body to adjust. Otherwise, it sounds like we might then be implementing sort of rules that can induce some more deprivation, I imagine. I have to stop when I'm full.
Yes, right,
Yes.
exactly. So what I'll tell people when that happens is like, I know it feels great, but I just want to anticipate with you, there's a good chance the binge will happen again. And if it does, it doesn't mean it's not working. It doesn't mean you did something wrong. It takes time to work your way out of this. So let me go back to this client because I haven't really talked about how getting out of the emotional eating works.
Yes.
So as a person is having more experiences of ending the deprivation driven eating, right? And they're reaching for food, they can say, I'm reaching for food. Am I hungry? And if the answer is yes, terrific, I get to eat. And they eat. But if the answer is no, then what they want to say is, can I wait? Because again, this isn't about control, right? It's not, we don't want people to make themselves not eat. They can still go to the food when they need to. So can I wait? And in the beginning, the answer is probably no, but eventually, can I wait? The answer is yes. And the reason it's yes is because if you can go back to those potato chips, if you can eat potato chips when you're hungry for potato chips, and you realize how much better they feel when you're hungry and they don't feel so great when you're not hungry. And so now something emotional is going on and you go to reach them. They don't do what they used to do. Like if you're not yelling at yourself, that's part of what takes you away from whatever you're feeling is all the yelling and, oh my God, here I go again. I've got to do something about it. I better go on a diet, as if that'll help you with whatever you're struggling with emotionally. So I'm reaching for food and I'm not hungry. What would I think about or feel if I didn't eat right now? So in the beginning, people can say, I'm reaching for food and I'm not hungry. I look forward to the day I don't need to do this anymore. But over time, when they reach for the food, it doesn't work so well once you have permission to eat the food, once the food's not glittering.
That makes sense. Like I can eat it if I want it. Am I hungry? Am I hungry right now? And it may be actually, no, I'm bored or I'm feeling anxious because I have nothing to write at this one moment.
Yeah.
So
it's a great question. It's another way to ask it. What am I really hungry for right now? And you're saying you were hungry for some stimulation, maybe.
Right.
Or hungry for some distraction.
Avoidance.
But then let's go back to your writing. So you realize I'm hungry for avoidance. So food is one way to avoid. Could you think of any other ways that you might avoid that might end up feeling better? It's up to you.
Yeah, taking a walk and making a phone call.
Yeah.
Answering 3 emails and then coming back. But being aware and insightful that I'm having this other feeling rather than impulsively driven to act on that immediate impulse to eat. Like you're drawing my attention to, am I hungry and am I hungry for what?
Right. So it goes back to what you said earlier, like being more aware of the hunger. And if you're working on your book and you're stuck and you want to avoid, but you're actually hungry too, it makes sense to eat. if you're not hungry, then you can say, the food is always there for me. Is there anything else that might help me distract right now or calm or whatever it is you're needing? Yeah.
How hard is it when you're working with somebody that has had a history of sort of compulsive binge eating, or I don't know if that's an okay word to use in this place, in this.
It's not that it's not, it's just compulsive doesn't really get used anymore.
Yes.
It's really
So,
binge eating.
so let me rephrase the question. So, how difficult when you're working with somebody who's had a history of binge eating, how how difficult is that step typically in your work for them to slow down and not continue to act by getting the food and instead taking the walk, or to recognize it? Is that is that one of the hardest?
I don't, I can't answer yes or no because everybody is so unique. It's part of why I love this work. Like there's some parts that are the same. The diet cycle is like the same for everyone, but everybody's story and the meaning is so unique.
Mm-hmm.
So for some people, just trying to think if I can come up with any recent examples, but for some people, they already have hobbies they like, or they're connected in the world. So reaching out to a friend comes more naturally. Other people really don't have a lot of other things to go to. And so,
Mm-hmm.
starting to build those. Um, Here's a typical one. And I'm thinking of a particular client, like her needing to slow down, right? Like she just is on the go, feeling she has to meet everybody's needs, kind of people pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we've understood with her binging sometimes is what she really needs is rest. And so the binge, she's so overfull, she has to slow down.
Oh,
Right.
yeah. What purpose is it actually serving to binge eat?
And
Mm-hmm.
so binging is I'm so full, all I can do is sit in my recliner. So what we've worked on and what she's doing actually really well, but it's taken a long time, is noticing her body needs rest and permission to rest, which in a lot of families is hard. A lot of kids grow up with you have to be productive, you have to be on the go. So
Uh,
not seeing that as, I always tell my clients when they use the word lazy, no, I don't like that word. It's not, there's a good reason and so it's not lazy to rest. It's actually
right.
attunement to sit when your body needs to slow down.
It's so non-shaming, and one of the things, Judith, that I love that you're emphasizing is this non-shaming way to tune in and provide what your body, instead of the focus on the deprivation, on the control, on the negative, and on the bad. It's like there's a reason you're going for that. Lean in and listen to that.
And I love
Yeah.
saying attuned eating leads to attuned living.
Yes.
So,
Attuned eating leads to attuned
so
living.
I have needs, hunger. My needs,
Mhm.
my needs are specific, certain types of food. My needs can be met. I'm satiated. And so as I work with people to get more connected around food, in fact, we often go back and forth with fun metaphors,
Mhm.
you'll find, but it really does increase that awareness of needs and being able to, in other areas of life, really find ways to nourish themselves.
Mhm. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So, being part of changing that narrative for yourself and for how you relate to the world, and for, if you're a therapist, for other people, and to unlearn, as you've been mentioning, is to unlearn is so, so important, and unlearn about that thin is best and healthiest. That's really been a light bulb moment for me in our talk, is to, there is the assumption that health is related to thinness. So that's really been a
Yeah,
light bulb.
yeah.
Yeah, and the shame, you and I were speaking. I thought I would drop this in before we ended. You and I were speaking before we jumped on about how much we have been culturized to think, okay, the thin in our culture, the thin is better. And you look at media, and you look at stars, and you look at who we um, as an example all over our TV and movie screens. And so, of course, we make the assumption that's what's normal, and that's what we're supposed to be. And if we're not that, we're somehow failing ourselves. And you and I spoke about a British. Do you know where I'm going with this? Right, I'm going to go ahead and mention it. Right, this Brit. I just found my adult kids showed me over the holiday that British. I guess it's a dating game called The Naked Truth. Is that right?
You reminded when you mentioned it. At first, I said I'd never seen it, and then a light bulb went off that one time somebody in my house had it on and I did see it. So I'll let you explain what it is.
Well, it's crazy, and I don't know if what's interesting about it. I mean, first I was just, to be honest with you, I was totally offended that my adult children were watching this, and they're like, "You got to see this." And then I have to admit, we sat there and we watched it together for a while, and the impact was really powerful. But what it is, it's a dating game that is all physical. And so there are some things I think I could object to for sure, but and it's all naked. So the person has this array of bodies hidden, and all they can see is the feet. And it goes up and up and up, and then you're staring at their genitals, right? And I'm not advocating for this. Let me just say, I didn't put it on. I'm not an advocate for it. I just noticed the shift in me as I watched it, because one of the things that started happening is they were showing all these very normal looking bodies. And I guess you might correct the word normal, average looking, like just what I mean is that the only thing we see about a naked body besides people in our personal lives is the media, these perfectly coiffed breasts, these abs of steel. And yet, over and over and over again, were these bodies of all shapes and sizes and weight, and are they, what's the word? Circumcised? Are they not circumcised? And after you watch this program, we started asking each other, is this increasing your body self-consciousness or decreasing it? I started asking, it wasn't just my adult kids, it was several of us watching it. Does this increase your self-consciousness or decrease? I'm just curious. Every single person said decrease.
It decreased their self-confidence?
It decreased their self-consciousness about their own body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, because they were seeing things like, oh my God, everybody has a little punch, and everybody has this, and everybody has flabs on their arms. And these were like 30, 40, 50-year-olds.
Yeah. And
it was so odd to have that.
And choosing who is still attracted to these bodies that are not what we're conventionally shown.
Right.
And, that makes me think, Anne, about social media can be difficult and it can be so helpful. But one of the ways it's helpful is that you can find people of all different shapes and sizes. So there's people who are higher weight who are into fashion and showing how they wear fashion. And many of my clients, because it is really hard. Like, I find people can heal their relationship with food generally quicker than they can feel more at home in their body, or feel more confident, changing. Because when you're healing body image, we think of body image as like an inside job, how you think about it. And there's all kinds of strategies for body image that are helpful. But the reality is you still have to deal with all the anti-fat bias out there. So it's not a one-person job. But to the extent that somebody is trying to improve the way or change the way they view their own body, looking at those images on social media that are getting a ton of likes and that are very body positive. There's a singer, Mary Lambert, who has really nice body positive. And at the network, I did an interview with her and I'm going to be showing it. But, just who's confident in her body. Like, that makes a difference to see somebody who looks like you, who's saying, I'm living a full life.
Yes, that is so wonderful. Yes.
It actually makes me want to go back to Ozempic because I feel like I never finished that.
Oh, please, let's go back to Ozempic.
So the thing about Ozempic then is that the pharmaceutical industry has spent a lot of time, money, and energy medicalizing weight, right? And they acknowledge that. And so, in fact, like in 2013, the American Medical Association declared obesity to be a disease against their own scientific advisory board.
Wow.
The pharmacy companies are playing into that. And in theory, that's supposed to be destigmatizing. It's not your fault you're fat. And we have a drug to help you, right? Take. The issue, on the other hand, though, is in some ways it makes it more stigmatizing because now you're fat, you're not going to do anything about it. What's the matter with you? Okay. And then beyond that, I just want to say that I think if people are considering Ozempic, they deserve to be informed of the pitfalls. There's a lot of side effects, and so many medications have side effects, but typical is nauseousness, and some people get an increased heart rate that becomes intolerable, and there's things like that. But
Ozempic personality, I've heard of Ozempic personality too, where the personality gets dampened.
That I haven't heard as much
Oh,
about. I tend to
mhm.
be more the physiological, but
Yeah.
I'm sure there's so many different things. And I also want to just say before I add more of them, Ozempic is an approved medication for diabetes, and for some people, it's the best medication for diabetes. So
Mhm.
I'm just talking. What they realized is that a side effect of Ozempic is weight loss, so they've increased the dosage to increase the side effect. But people are getting some. I mean, it's a small percentage, but given how many people are using it, gastroparesis, where the stomach freezes. I mean, that's very dangerous. And this one for people, um, it promotes bone loss.
Mm.
So particularly for older people, they're becoming frail from using it. So something that's meant to promote health is, there's so many ways it's not healthy. I've one client who decided to try it, and we have an extra session this week because she was feeling so sick on it. And once she went off it, guess what happened? She's binging like crazy
Ah, yes.
because and that's what happens when you go off it. You can expect binging to return or
Because
to
the food
start
noise goes up. Is that why? Like, is
because you're undernourishing your body. You're eating, it's
oh.
slowing down digestion to feel full quicker, and you're undernourishing your body.
Mhm.
And and the pharmaceutical company will say you have to stay on Ozempic for life.
Mm.
Once you go off it, the weight will come back. So people
Mhm.
need to be able to give informed consent to make sure they understand what they're signing on for.
Because I
And what,
guess it would be an easy thing to believe. If I lose the weight, I just want to use it till I lose the weight. And then once I lose the weight, I'm going to stop and do it on a regular basis. But that's not what the research says.
no, 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 no.
Hmm.
But let's find a more positive note to.
No, I mean, but I think that's really, really helpful. Um, for people to just have at least informed consent. So, what have I not asked you? What is the couple of things that you would love to share that I might have missed?
We have covered so much that nothing comes to mind. I mean, I can talk about this for hours. So I'll go back to something I was saying about when people have gotten to where they're binge eat, like what recovery looks like from binge eating disorder.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what I actually see is that the binges become further apart. So not that it suddenly stops, but they're further apart. And really significantly, people can stop them sooner. Because instead of
Mm-hmm.
saying, well, as long as I'm eating, I might as well keep having the cake or the candy because starting Monday, right?
Oh, I know. Yeah, I've been there. Starting on January 1st, so I might as well.
So instead of doing that, they
Yeah.
can say, um, none of these foods are going away. The sooner I stop, the better I won't get as uncomfortable. And then I can
Mm-hmm.
wait again until I'm hungry. And so somebody goes along, we were talking about my 75-year-old client. And, one day she came in and there was something, it had been months since she had binged, but she had binged.
Mm-hmm.
And when we slowed it down to try to figure out what it was, we understood something that had upset her. And I
Mm-hmm.
will say with my clients, like people say, what does recovery look like? Will I stop binging forever? Some people might, but I always think of it as still a vulnerability. It's something you can go
Sure.
to in a time of distress. So I had one, can I swear on your show?
You can. Yes.
I had one client who called these AFOs because I'd say this is an opportunity to learn something about yourself. It's like, you're binging, there's something you need to pay attention to.
Uh-huh.
To call these AFOs another fucking opportunity.
I love it. I love it. Each time you get off of it, it's another fucking opportunity to get back on rather than some sense of failure.
To learn something about
To,
yourself. Like,
oh,
oh,
yeah.
my friend hurt my feelings. I didn't realize in the moment how much it mattered to me what she said.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That's a great note to start wrapping up with another one. And all of those learning opportunities are amazing processes for growth.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendation for helping people um, share, like helping people shift on their own, or how the process? Let me try this again. Do you have any recommendations for people who have lived in this culture? We've all lived in this culture with the negative fat culture stigma or the weight stigma. Do you have any specific suggestions for helping us unlearn that specifically?
Hmm. Well, first, listening to your podcast today was a great start.
Oh, good.
And read. start by reading, start by listening to podcasts. There are so many people out there doing this work. I mean, I always, when people say, do you think, Judith, are things getting better or worse? My answer is both. There's much
Yeah.
more intensity around losing weight and diet culture and wellness culture, which just is
Mm-hmm.
a reflection of diet culture in some ways. But there are so many more people who are adopting weight inclusive frameworks and who are writing books. And I'm happy to, I mean, obviously I hope people will start with mine, Beyond a Shadow of a Diet, and the workbook would be two great places.
And those will be in our show notes. Those will be references. I think they're great,
One of my
great
co
resources.
One of my co-authors, Christy Harrison, has a wonderful podcast called Food Psych. There's over 300 episodes, and everything would be
What is it called again? Say it again.
Psych, Psych.
Oh, food psych. Oh,
And
okay.
every episode would be consistent with what I've talked about today. But any topic, I know there's one on dating at a higher weight. There's one on fertility. And, any topic
Mm-hmm.
you might wonder about, you can scroll through the episodes and find. Um, I can give you more books to put in the notes if that's
Sure.
all.
That'd be
Right.
perfect.
There's just a lot out there. So some people might be more focused on the eating part. Some might be more focused on rejecting, on learning more about health at every size, or books that talk more about unlearning weight stigma. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
to choose from. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
there's
But
training.
be part of learning. Be part of unlearning. Be part of unlearning for yourself, those people that you love. If you're somebody that have not thought too much about your weight, but have people in your life, maybe they're admiring you for your thinness, and instead of it being some mark of your success and their failure, that you're going to take that on as a shift.
I mean, even that, like ending,
Yes.
not participating in weight loss conversations, not
Yes.
complimenting people on their weight, compliment them on their smile or their new
Hmm.
haircut, but not their weight.
Hmm. I love that. Judith, thank you so much for coming on today. I've really learned so much from you and the conversations we had, and I can't wait to sit in on your conference at the Psychotherapy Network. Or
Forward to it.
thank you for what you do. You're making a difference.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on your show today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today. If what you heard you feel like is going to be helpful to you or to anyone else, please send it on, rate and review. When you rate and review us, it helps people find us. And as I mentioned earlier, if you decide to attend Psychotherapy Network, we would love to know. Send us an email. We'd love to meet our listeners. All right. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll see you around the bend.